Depeche Mode from back in their PPG Wavetable days. The song See You is from the album A Broken Frame 1982, and we can play all of the original PPG wavetables on the tracker. This is tutorial number 3 for the Polyend tracker discussing wavetable. In addition, I'll talk about a way to make the oscillator sound randomly out of tune to get an analog sound, making notes overlap polyphonically, and other things as well. In the next one, tracker tutorial number 4, I will discuss easy ways to use the tracker as your drum machine. So be sure and subscribe and click the bell for all so you get the notification. The project file and raw sample files will be available for download over at my Patreon as always. Wolfgang Palm invented the wavetable idea, and here is his booth back in 1982 at Music Messe. Can you imagine stepping in there and talking to Mr. Palm about his synth? It would be amazing. So let's start with what a wavetable is. If you loop a small portion of any sample, you can make something that sounds a bit like an oscillator. And if you purposely make the sample to be divided in 64 sections, each of which represents the particular oscillator you want, you can skip around to the 64 different oscillators and interpolate or morph between them as well. A normal sample doesn't sound right when you play it as a wavetable because it isn't specifically designed for these 64 segments like a PPG type of file, but there are other standard sizes as well that make it more universal to use wavetables. You can get the original PPG wavetables and some others from waveeditonline.com. I remember it blew us all away when we first heard that crazy synthetic human voice in the song See You, and then those otherworldly bells. Nobody knew what it was. There was no internet and no information about it. And that synthetic human voice was PPG table number 27, the formant vocal wavetable. And as you can see from the diagram, that it can be divided into 64 oscillators, having the traditional oscillators there at the end. You can see the saw, square, pulse, and triangle waves. And you can see that if you repeated this last segment over and over, you would get a saw wave. And we certainly can do this in the tracker. If you've seen my other 2 videos, you know how to get to this stage here where you've loaded the samples in and they're ready to be turned into instruments. And so we're going to start here with the formant vocal wave. And let's just load it in as a standard sample. And you see that it sounds terrible because its intended use is to be divided into those oscillators. So as a wavetable, we have all these individual oscillators. I have the window set to 256 samples, and you can also turn it to these other divisions, 512, 1024, 2048, so we can scan through those and listen to them. Some sounding more human than others, and you could automate that scanning by going to page 2 of 2 on the instrument parameters button. Select here wavetable position and turn the envelope on with these settings, and it will scan through those wavetables. Now if you want a slower scan, you turn the attack up. Now if you want a more interpolated wavetable scanning sound, over here at Sample Editor, there's a wavetable smoother. So getting to the Depeche Mode See You example, there are 4 PPG waves that I have loaded in here. I've got number 13, the Clipper wave, 14, the organ sin, which I used for the bell sound. I've got, of course, 27, the formant vocal. And then I have 29, the pulse width modulation, wavetable that I use to make the harpsichord sound. When the song begins, you have the synthetic voice and the bass together. So let's take a look at those. So I'm using wave number 31, which I thought was pretty close to what Depeche Mode used. And you can hear I have some reverb on that, but let's take a look at the instrument parameters. Hit the instrument parameters button, and you can see that there is a low pass filter on it. Hitting effects now, you can see that the reverb send is pretty much all the way up. Instrument parameters page 2, and you can see there's a volume envelope set up like this, and a little vibrato on the voice that you can choose LFO, set to triangle, and 3 steps. Now I have it set to 17, but I can put it more extreme to let you hear. And then there's the bass sound, and it's being played as a one shot. Taking a look at the instrument parameters, it has a low pass filter with a little bit of resonance, and the cutoff is turned all the way down, and that's because I want the cutoff to be controlled by an envelope that will give it that quick and sharp bass sound. Going to the instrument parameters here, there is a volume envelope that's just set very generally to keep it from trailing on forever on most of these sounds. To the cutoff, I'm using an envelope to modulate that with kind of a short decay, create that sharp bass sound. And here's where I added the analog effect. So with the fine tune, I put an LFO at random every 2 steps. And so it's making it sound like an old analog synth that each oscillator is a little out of tune, but it goes randomly, so it never repeats, and it sounds very organic sounding with a setting of 17. But let me play it and go to the extreme to let you hear what it does. So you get that great analog effect. And so with the bass line and the synthetic voice together, let's take a look at the clipper for a second. It makes that sound. And I just have a volume envelope on that one. And then there's the organ syn, which I'm using as a bell. And I put a little reverb on that. These are the settings for the bell. So on the bell, I've got a low pass filter again turned all the way down on the cutoff. So you wouldn't be able to hear it until you use the envelope here on cutoff. Envelope to give it that sharp attack sound, like a bell being struck by your mallet. And I'm using the pulse width modulation wavetable to do the harpsichord. So I'm using the high pass filter to sound more like a harpsichord, and you can see the settings there. So Depeche Mode does a little thing where the bell plays and then the harpsichord answers back. And what I've done is I've staggered the 2 harpsichord tracks there. It's the identical harpsichord just on 2 tracks, and because it's staggered, it allows notes to overlap each other, and it actually sounds like a polyphonic harpsichord. So I'll play a little of that for you. And then I really love how Depeche Mode used the bass and the brass together to fill everything out. Then there's a really strange castanet sound. I know Daniel Miller used to make sounds on the ARP 2600, and possibly that's where that came from. And I think Depeche Mode used the KR55 drum machine. And so that sums up Wavetables. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe for tutorial number 4, where I'm going to discuss how to turn the tracker into a little drum machine. See you then. I'll play it out from slot 7 here.